Have you ever woken up to find yourself erased from the very job you built from nothing, no warning, no explanation, just a Slack notification, and your name vanished from history? But when those who think they're smarter start playing power games, they don't realize you hold the system's keys, and once they fire you, they've just armed a $119 million data bomb. This is how I watched an entire company burn itself down, all because they called me Grandma Code in a group chat they thought I'd never see. My name is Lauren Hale, and for 7 years, I was the invisible backbone of Nexora Systems, lead compliance engineer, not the sexiest title in Silicon Valley, but every line of code that kept our SaaS platform from imploding had my fingerprints on it. That Monday morning in October started like any other, except my name had vanished from the weekly ops call invite. 7 years of perfect attendance, and suddenly, I didn't exist. I thought it was a calendar glitch. Maybe someone fat-fingered the invite list. But when I walked into Conference Room Atlas at 9:30 sharp, coffee in hand, the air felt different, thick, charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. Evan Marsh sat at the head of the table, feet propped up on the mahogany surface, pristine white sneakers catching the morning light, 35 years old, Stanford MBA, and our new CEO as of 3 months ago. He had that particular brand of tech bro confidence that comes from failing upward through 2 startups before landing in the C-suite. His hoodie probably cost more than my monthly car payment. "Oh, Lauren," he said, not looking up from his phone. "Didn't realize you were still attending these." Still attending, I'd been running compliance reviews in these meetings since before Evan knew what a SaaS platform was. I took my usual seat, third from the window, and opened my laptop. The slide deck was already up on the main screen. Nexora 3.0, the AI-first future. Every slide dripped with buzzwords. Revolutionary modularity, bleeding-edge scalability, cloud-native transformation. When Evan clicked to slide 7, titled, "Eliminating Legacy Bottlenecks," my blood went cold. There it was, in 48-point font, "Legacy Systems Holding Us Back." The bullet points below might as well have had my photo next to them. Outdated compliance frameworks, manual oversight processes, pre-cloud architecture. He looked directly at me when he said the word legacy, drawing it out like he was savoring wine. The junior developers, kids fresh from boot camps with their MacBooks covered in startup stickers, snickered. One of them, barely 23, actually rolled his eyes when I opened my mouth to speak. "The compliance framework has prevented 14 critical failures this quarter alone," I said, keeping my voice steady. "It's not legacy, it's battle-tested." Evan's smile was all teeth, no warmth. Battle-tested. That's a nice way of saying old. Isn't it, like, what do they call those cars? Vintage? More Snickers from the peanut gallery. "We're moving fast now. Lauren, breaking things, the Silicon Valley way." Breaking things. The mantra of every CEO who'd never had to clean up the pieces at 3 in the morning when the platform crashed and took half our enterprise clients with it. But I bit my tongue. I'd survived 3 CEOs before Evan. I could survive him too. Or so I thought. The meeting continued for another 40 minutes. Every time I tried to contribute, Evan would cut me off with "interesting perspective," or "we'll take that offline." The new hires discussed AI integration and quantum-ready infrastructure like they were playing startup bingo. None of them understood that our entire system ran on an orchestration framework I'd built from scratch, refined over thousands of hours, documented in notebooks they'd never bother to read. When the meeting ended, I stayed behind, pretending to pack up slowly. Evan hadn't moved from his chair. "You know, Lauren," he said, examining his pristine nails, "sometimes I wonder if you're happy here." "I've been here 7 years. I helped build this company." "Exactly. 7 years. That's like 70 in startup years." He finally looked at me, and his eyes were cold as winter rain. Maybe it's time to think about what's next, for both of us. I knew a threat when I heard one, but what Evan didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I wasn't just some middle-aged engineer they could push aside for the new generation. I was the keeper of secrets, the one who knew where every digital body was buried, every shortcut taken, every critical dependency hidden in our sprawling codebase. Walking back to my desk, I passed the new innovation lab they'd built where the old server room used to be, beanbags and whiteboards, and a 65-inch screen running a dashboard full of meaningless metrics. The children were playing house in a building I'd helped wire from the ground up. That night, I went home and pulled out a notebook I hadn't touched in 2 years. My insurance policy, every system, every dependency, every undocumented feature that kept Nexora running, and there, on page 47, written in my careful handwriting, was the thing that would matter most, Clause 4C of our vendor renewal contract from 2019. They thought I was a relic, a legacy system to be deprecated and replaced. They had no idea what they were about to lose. The transformation happened fast. Within 2 weeks of that meeting, Nexora's halls filled with fresh faces, kids who looked like they'd stepped out of a TechCrunch article. They called themselves innovation architects, growth evangelists, disruption specialists. Their resumes gleamed with bootcamp certificates and hackathon wins. But ask them about load balancing or database normalization, and their eyes would glaze over. They colonized the 3rd floor first, transforming our quiet workspace into what looked like a WeWork fever dream. Neon signs spelling out, "Move fast" and "Fail forward." Standing desks that no one stood at. A coffee bar serving oat milk cortados that cost $12. The air reeked of ambition and overpriced cologne. I watched them swarm our morning stand-ups, interrupting with suggestions to leverage AI for problems that required 2 lines of SQL. When I explained our compliance triggers, the careful safeguards that kept us from violating federal regulations, a kid named Tyler, maybe 24, actually laughed. "Compliance triggers," he said, adjusting his AirPods Pro. "Who even uses that anymore? We have machine learning now. The algorithm can handle compliance." "The algorithm," I repeated slowly, "doesn't understand GDPR or CCPA or the 17 state-level privacy laws we're subject to." Tyler exchanged glances with his cohort, that look young people give each other when they think you're explaining how to use a rotary phone. "Okay, boomer," someone whispered, not quite quietly enough. I wasn't even 50, but in this new Nexora, anyone over 30 was ancient history. They started routing around me like I was damaged infrastructure. Slack channels appeared that I wasn't invited to hash future stack, innovation core, next gen Nexora. When I'd walk into the kitchen, conversations would halt mid-sentence. They'd smile those tight, patronizing smiles reserved for relatives with dementia. "Oh, Lauren," they'd chirp, still using Visual Studio. "Have you tried our new AI coding assistant? It basically writes itself." The worst part was watching them fumble with systems they didn't understand. They'd push updates that broke integrations, then panic when enterprise clients started calling, 3 times in 1 week. I had to fix critical failures at 2 a.m. while the innovation team was at a rooftop mixer or a synergy session at some overpriced sushi place. But I kept my mouth shut and documented everything, every fix, every failure, every time they ignored my warnings and broke something expensive. The real insult came during the Q3 planning session. Evan had hired a consulting firm, 3 20-somethings in identical Allbirds, who charged $500 an hour to tell us what I'd been saying for free. They presented a revolutionary architecture that was essentially our current system with AI buzzwords sprinkled on top. "We're going to deprecate the legacy compliance framework," announced the lead consultant, a woman named Madison who kept pronouncing sequel as sequel, like she'd just learned the term. "It's holding back our velocity." "That framework processes 3 million transactions daily," I interjected. "It's the only thing standing between us and a federal audit." Madison's smile was so condescending I could taste it. That's exactly the kind of fear-based thinking that keeps companies stuck in the past. We're building for the future here. Evan nodded along like she'd just explained quantum physics. "Exactly, Lauren. I think you're too emotionally attached to the old code. It's not personal. It's just business." Emotionally attached to code that I'd written, refined, and maintained while Evan was still figuring out his first startup's burn rate. Code that had my logic, my understanding, my intelligence woven into every function. They didn't know about the orchestration framework's true nature, how I'd built it modularly, with each component licensed separately, how the core engine, the part everything else depended on, was registered under my personal LLC from when I'd done the initial development as a contractor before becoming full-time. It was all legal, all documented, all forgotten in a contract renewal from 2019 that no one had bothered to read. After that meeting, I started preparing, not for a fight, that war was already lost, but for what would come after. I updated my documentation, adding subtle notes about dependencies they'd never notice until it was too late. I carefully transferred certain key repositories to private backups, all within the bounds of my original contractor agreement. The young guns strutted around the office, planning their brave new world on whiteboards covered in arrows and clouds. They had no idea they were building castles on quicksand. The foundation they scorned, the legacy system they mocked, was more integral than they could imagine. One afternoon, I overheard Tyler telling another newcomer, "Once we sunset Lauren's old stuff, we'll be able to move at light speed. She's like that person who still uses Internet Explorer, just holding everyone back." I smiled and kept typing. Let them think I was obsolete. Let them believe their AI-generated code and boot camp knowledge could replace 7 years of institutional memory. They were about to learn that in technology, as in life, you don't truly value something until it's gone. And I was going to make sure that when I left, I took more with me than they ever imagined possible. The calendar invite arrived on a Tuesday at 3:47 p.m. Transition review. No description, no agenda. Just HR and Evan listed as required attendees alongside my name, scheduled for Friday at 4 p.m. The death slot. Everyone knows if HR schedules you for late Friday afternoon, you're not coming back Monday. My manager, Derek, suddenly developed an inability to make eye contact. When I asked him about the meeting during our one-on-one, he studied his coffee mug like it contained the secrets of the universe. "Just a routine check-in," he mumbled. "You know how corporate is about documentation." Derek was many things, but a good liar wasn't one of them. His left eye twitched whenever he was nervous, and right now it was practically vibrating. That night, I stayed late, not to work. That pretense had ended weeks ago. Instead, I pulled out the notebook I'd been maintaining since my first day at Nexora. 7 years of meticulous documentation, system architectures, database schemas, API keys, and most importantly, the paper trail everyone had forgotten existed. Page by page, I reviewed the contracts, the addendums, the licensing agreements that formed the legal skeleton of our technology stack, and there it was, buried in subsection 4C of the 2019 Vendor Renewal Agreement, a clause I'd insisted on when I was transitioning from contractor to full-time employee. In the event that the primary framework architect's employment is terminated without proper transition protocols, including a minimum 90-day knowledge transfer period and documented handover of all system dependencies, the orchestration framework will automatically revert to dormant compliance lockdown mode to protect intellectual property and ensure regulatory compliance. The beauty was in the language. It sounded like a security feature, which it was, but it was also a dead man's switch, and I held the only key. I spent the next 2 days quietly executing my contingency plan. First, I registered the framework's core components under my LLC, Crescent Logic LLC. Perfectly legal since I'd developed them as a contractor and retained certain rights in my original agreement. The company had been paying licensing fees to my LLC for years, buried in a line item no one ever questioned. Then I updated the framework's authentication module. One single commit, pushed at 11:53 p.m. on Wednesday night, disguised as a routine security patch. The code was elegant in its simplicity. If the system detected any modification to the core framework without valid credentials from Crescent Logic LLC, it would interpret this as a potential security breach. The response: immediate lockdown of all data processes to prevent unauthorized access or regulatory violations. completely reversible, if you had the proper licenses. Thursday was surreal. People who hadn't spoken to me in weeks suddenly wanted to grab coffee or pick my brain about various systems. The vultures were circling, trying to extract last-minute knowledge before the axe fell. I gave them exactly what they expected. Basic information they could have found in our documentation wiki if anyone had bothered to maintain it after I stopped updating it 3 weeks ago. Tyler cornered me near the printer, fake concern oozing from every pore. "Hey, Lauren, just wanted to make sure you're documenting everything for, continuity purposes. Would hate to lose any institutional knowledge." Institutional knowledge. The phrase almost made me laugh. They'd spent months telling me my knowledge was obsolete, and now they wanted me to gift wrap it for them on my way out. "Everything's in the wiki," I said pleasantly. "Has been for years." "Right, but the real stuff, the undocumented features, the workarounds." I smiled. "There are no undocumented features in my code." "Tyler, that would be poor engineering practice." It was a lie, of course. Every system has its shadows. Its quick fixes that become permanent. Its elegant hacks that no one wants to admit exist. But Tyler didn't need to know about the authentication backdoors, the manual override switches, or the fact that our entire billing system relied on a cron job that I'd been manually resetting every quarter, because the automated process had broken in 2021 and no one approved the resources to fix it properly. That evening, I downloaded my personal files, cleared my browser history, and organized my desk. I left everything exactly as it should be for someone who expected to return Monday morning. The only thing I took home was the potted succulent I'd nursed for 3 years. Even that felt like a small victory. I also made one final update to the framework documentation, buried deep in the technical specifications where no one would look until it was too late. Framework licensing managed by Crescent Logic LLC. For renewal or technical support, contact authorized representative only. Friday morning arrived gray and drizzling, Seattle showing its typical February mood. I dressed carefully, professional but not desperate, the outfit of someone with options. I even stopped for my usual coffee, exchanging pleasantries with the barista who knew my order by heart. The office buzzed with typical Friday energy. Half the engineering team was already mentally checked out, planning weekend hackathons or ski trips. No one noticed me backing up my personal development environment to a cloud instance I controlled. No one saw me verify that all my license keys were properly registered to Crescent Logic. 3:55 p.m. I closed my laptop, straightened my desk one last time, and walked to conference room Delta. Through the glass walls, I could see Evan and the HR director, Patricia, already seated, tablets and paperwork spread before them like weapons. I paused at the door, hand on the handle. 7 years of my life behind that door. And if I was right, the next few weeks would be the most expensive lesson Nexora Systems ever learned about the true value of institutional knowledge. I pushed the door open and stepped inside, armed with nothing but the certainty that their carefully planned corporate takedown was about to backfire spectacularly. Patricia's smile was polished and mechanical, the kind you rehearse in front of a mirror. She slid a folder across the table with precision, while Evan barely glanced up from his phone, radiating the kind of indifference that said he thought this was already won. "Lauren, we're restructuring the engineering department to align with our AI-first initiative," Patricia began, reading from a script she'd probably delivered 3 times this week. "Your position is being eliminated effective immediately." Eliminated, not reassigned, not evolved, eliminated, like I was a bug in the code. "We're prepared to offer a generous severance package," she continued. 2 weeks' pay, continuation of health benefits through the month, and a positive reference for future opportunities. 2 weeks, 7 years of building their infrastructure, and I was worth 2 weeks. Evan finally looked up from his phone. "It's nothing personal. Lauren, you're talented, but we need people who can move at startup speed. The market's brutal right now." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. Inside, my mind was already 3 steps ahead. "I understand. I'll need some time to transition my projects." "Actually," Evan's smile turned sharp, We've already assigned your responsibilities to the innovation team. Tyler will be taking over the compliance framework. He's eager to modernize it. Tyler, who thought SQL injection was a medical procedure until 6 months ago? I see. And the documentation. We have everything we need, Patricia interjected quickly. Your badge will be deactivated at 5 p.m. Security will escort you out to collect any personal items. Security? Like I was a criminal. Like I might steal something on my way out. The irony was delicious. They had no idea what I already owned. Actually, I said, pulling out my phone, before we proceed, you might want to check your Slack. Evan frowned. What? Check the HUD general channel. About 20 minutes ago. They both reached for their devices. I watched their faces change as they read. Someone had screenshot a conversation from their Executive Strategy Slack channel and posted it to HUD General. The conversation was from 3 days ago. Timestamp 2:13 a.m. Evan. She's done. The grandma code's gotta go. CFO Richardson. Her severance costs less than one K-pop sponsorship. Patricia HR. LOL. Evan. Tyler says he can rebuild her shit in 2 weeks with ChatGPT. COO Myers. The channel had exploded. Dozens of employees expressing shock, anger, disgust. The screenshot was spreading through the company like wildfire. How did you... Evan's face was turning an interesting shade of purple. I didn't, I said truthfully. But it seems like someone in your inner circle thinks you're as toxic as I do. Later, I'd learn it was Richardson's assistant who leaked it. Turns out she was tired of being treated like furniture too. But in that moment, watching them scramble to do damage control, I felt the first real joy I'd experienced in months. We need to... Patricia was typing frantically. This is a violation of confidentiality. We could pursue legal action. Against whom? I asked. Your own C-suite for creating a hostile work environment, or the whistleblower who exposed it. I'm sure the tech press would love that story. Nexora Systems fires engineer. Calls her grandma code in executive chat. Evans slammed his laptop shut. You're done. Get out. Security will mail your personal items. My personal items, I repeated slowly. Of course. Just to clarify, you're terminating me immediately. No transition period. No knowledge transfer. Get out. Patricia looked uncomfortable. Evan, maybe we should... Now. I stood, smoothing my blazer. I'll need that in writing. The immediate termination, for my records. Patricia printed a single page, and Evan signed it with such force he nearly tore through the paper. I folded it carefully and placed it in my pocket. Evidence. Security was already waiting outside. Marcus, who I'd helped set up 2-factor authentication for his daughter's gaming account last month. He looked mortified. Lauren, I'm sorry about this. It's your job, Marcus. No hard feelings. The walk to my desk felt like a funeral procession. Developers prairie-dogged from their cubicles, watching the execution. Some looked sympathetic. Others, the innovation team, tried to hide their smirks. I was allowed to take only what security could verify was personal. My succulent, a coffee mug that said, World's Okayest Programmer, a Secret Santa gift from 3 years ago, a photo of my sister's kids. Tyler was already sitting at my desk, my former desk, running his hands over my keyboard like he'd won a prize. Don't worry, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I'll take good care of your legacy code, might even refactor it into something modern. I looked him in the eye and smiled. I'm sure you'll try. Marcus escorted me to the elevator. As the doors closed, I saw Evans storm out of the conference room, his phone pressed to his ear, probably calling legal or PR or both. In the lobby, Marcus handed me a cardboard box with my things. Lauren, what you did for this company, everyone knows, the real engineers, we know. Thank you, Marcus. I walked out of Nexora Systems at 5:23 p.m. on a rainy Friday afternoon, carrying 7 years of my life in a box that weighed less than my laptop. But I left something behind, a single line of code, a legal clause, and a framework that was about to become very, very possessive about who could touch it. That night, I turned off my phone, poured a glass of wine, and sat on my balcony watching the city lights. Somewhere across town, Tyler was probably diving into my code, eager to prove he could improve it. He had no idea he was about to trigger a contract clause that would make Nexora's grandma code look like their most valuable asset in retrospect. The rain kept falling, washing the city clean. I raised my glass to the skyline. Good luck, boys. You're going to need it. The weekend passed in deliberate silence. Phone off, email disconnected, LinkedIn notifications ignored. I spent Saturday at the farmer's market, Sunday reading a novel I'd bought 2 years ago. Normal things, human things, things that had nothing to do with servers or uptime or Tyler's grabby little hands on my keyboard. But while I was selecting heirloom tomatoes and debating sourdough varieties, my final commit was settling into the codebase like a sleeping virus. Not malicious, I'm not a criminal, just protective. The framework checking permissions, validating licenses, waiting for someone to cross a line they didn't know existed. Monday, 10:07 a.m. Tyler made his first change. It was small, renaming a variable from my convention camel case to his snake case. A tiny edit that shouldn't matter, but the framework noticed. It checked for authentication, found none, checked for a valid license from Crescent Logic LLC, found none. And then, like a guard dog sensing an intruder, it began its protection protocol. The beauty was in the subtlety. No alarms, no error messages, just a quiet tightening of permissions, a gradual restriction of access, like slowly closing your hand around something fragile, careful not to break it, but determined not to let go. I know this because I watched it happen from my apartment, logged into the monitoring dashboard I'd set up years ago, completely legal, part of my LLC's service agreement to ensure framework stability. The logs told the story in real time. 10:07:23. Unauthorized modification detected. 10:07:24. Checking Crescent Logic, LLC. License status. 10:07:25. No valid license found. 10:07:26. Initiating compliance protection protocol. 10:07:27. Stage 1. Soft restrictions enabled. Stage 1 was gentle, just enough friction to be annoying, but not enough to raise alarms. API calls would take an extra second. Database queries would occasionally time out, the sort of things that make developers curse and check their internet connection. By Wednesday, Tyler had made 17 changes. Each one tightened the noose a little more. The framework was learning his patterns, understanding his access methods, building a profile of the intruder. I spent those days at coffee shops, laptop open to legitimate job hunting sites while secretly monitoring the chaos. My former coworkers' Slack messages still visible through a webhook. I'd forgotten to mention during my exit. Painted a beautiful picture. Tyler innovation. Anyone else having latency issues? Dev Sandra. Yeah, billing API is sluggish. Tyler innovation. Must be Lauren's spaghetti code. Dev Marcus. It wasn't doing this last week. Thursday, 2:33 p.m. Tyler decided to be aggressive. He attempted to refactor the entire authentication module, my authentication module, replacing it with some open-source solution he'd found on GitHub. The framework responded like an immune system detecting a pathogen. Stage 2. Active protection initiated. Now the symptoms became impossible to ignore. Token regeneration accelerated, forcing users to log in every few minutes. Session data developed amnesia, forgetting user preferences. The billing queue began processing transactions in slow motion, taking minutes instead of milliseconds. But the masterstroke was in the error messages. Instead of clear debugging information, the system returned poetry. Access denied like winter frost. Credentials that you thought weren't lost are somewhere in the legal files. Check subsection 4C for smiles. Tyler's Slack messages grew increasingly frantic. Tyler Innovation. WTF. Is this Tyler Innovation? Why is it rhyming? Tyler Innovation. I can't find subsection 4C anywhere. CTO Williams. Tyler. Status update. Now. Friday morning, 8:45 a.m. Exactly 1 week after they'd escorted me out like a criminal, the innovation team called an emergency meeting. I wasn't there, of course, but Marcus was kind enough to accidentally pocket dial me during it. Tyler's voice, high and stressed. It's like the code is fighting back. Every change I make triggers new restrictions, and these messages, they're taunting us. CTO Williams. How is code taunting you? Tyler. Look at this error log. A pause, then Williams reading, Your access has been declined today. Perhaps there's been some price to pay. Check with legal for the way. Crescent Logic LLC holds sway. Evan's voice, sharp as broken glass. What the hell is Crescent Logic? The room went quiet. I could imagine them frantically Googling, finding the LLC registration, seeing my name as the sole proprietor, the dawning realization that their grandma code had teeth. Williams again. Quieter. She owns the framework. We've been licensing it from her LLC this entire time. That's impossible, Evan's voice cracked. She was an employee. She was a contractor first. Check the 2019 agreements. More silence, papers rustling, then Patricia from HR. Her voice small. Subsection 4C, termination without proper transition triggers. Oh my God. What? Evan demanded. Dormant compliance lockdown. It's a security feature to protect the integrity of the system if the primary architect is removed without knowledge transfer. Tyler. Defensive. So we just need her to unlock it. Williams laughed, but there was no humor in it. She has no obligation to do anything. We terminated her without cause, without transition. We're in breach of contract. So we'll hire someone else to break it. Break it, Tyler. This isn't some WordPress plugin. This framework processes millions in transactions daily. One wrong move and we could lose everything. And that's assuming we can even legally touch it without her permission. I closed my eyes, listening to their panic, and felt nothing. No joy, no vindication. Just the cold satisfaction of a chess player watching their opponent realize they'd been in checkmate 3 moves ago. The framework continued its slow constriction, not destroying anything. That would be criminal. Just protecting itself, like any good security system should, waiting for proper authentication that would never come. By noon, their client complaints had started rolling in. By 3 p.m., the innovation team had stopped trying to fix it. And somewhere in that beautiful chaos, someone made the decision that would seal Nexora's fate. They tried to restore from a backup, not realizing that every backup from the last 2 years contained my framework, my safeguards, my sleeping giant of a protection protocol. The restoration triggered stage 3, but that's a story for Monday morning. When the real fireworks began, Monday morning arrived with a cascade of disasters. I woke at 6:30 a.m. to my personal phone buzzing with LinkedIn notifications, former colleagues viewing my profile, recruiters suddenly interested, tech journalists adding me as a connection. Something big was happening at Nexora. I made coffee and opened my monitoring dashboard. The logs from the weekend told a story of escalating panic. Saturday at 11:43 p.m., someone had attempted to restore from a January backup. Sunday at 3:17 a.m., they'd tried December, then November. Each restoration triggered the framework's protection protocol anew, like pressing replay on their own destruction. The billing queue had developed what could only be described as selective amnesia. It processed some transactions instantly, held others for hours, and occasionally forgot they existed entirely. Not losing data, that would be illegal. Just procrastinating, like a teenager asked to clean their room. Token authentication had become philosophical, questioning the very nature of identity. Are you really who you claim to be? It would ask, then time out before accepting any answer. Sessions expired at random intervals, sometimes seconds, sometimes hours, with no discernible pattern. But the real artist's touch was in the API responses. Every error now came with a haiku. Access you do seek, but credentials are antique. Check your contract. Peak. My Slack webhook. They still hadn't revoked my integration tokens. Amateur Hour showed the engineering channel in full meltdown. Dev Sandra. Client dashboard is showing data from 2022. Dev Marcus. Mine is showing future dates that don't exist. Backend Jim. The database isn't corrupted. It's just confused. Tyler Innovation. This makes no sense. Cito Williams. All hands meeting. Now. Conference room A. I decided to visit my favorite coffee shop, the one with the good Wi-Fi and the barista who never asked questions. Laptop open. I pulled up Nexora's status page. They were trying to maintain the illusion of control. Minor service disruptions. Our team is working on improvements. Minor. Like calling a hurricane slightly breezy. By 10 a.m., the framework had evolved its tactics. It began implementing what I called malicious compliance mode. Every request was technically fulfilled, just not how anyone expected. Search for user Johnson. Here's every Johnson who ever existed in the system, in random order, one result per page. Update a billing address. Certainly, but it would revert after exactly 17 minutes. The innovation team tried everything. They brought in contractors, consultants, even a blockchain expert, because somehow blockchain would fix this. Each new person who touched the code triggered fresh restrictions. The framework was learning, adapting, protecting itself with an almost biological determination. At 11:52 a.m., someone made a critical error. They tried to bypass the framework entirely, accessing the database directly. This was the equivalent of trying to hotwire a car that had been specifically designed to explode if hotwired. As stage 3, full defensive activation. The system didn't crash. That would be merciful. Instead, it began what I'd coded as time dilation mode. Every operation now took exponentially longer based on how many unauthorized access attempts had been made. 1 attempt, 1 second delay, 2 attempts, 4 seconds, 3 attempts, 9 seconds. They were at attempt number 47. My phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Then another call, and another. Finally, a text from a number I recognized. Patricia from HR. Lauren, please, we need to talk. I texted back, I'm no longer an employee of Nexora Systems. Please direct all communications through my attorney. I didn't have an attorney, yet. The Slack channel had devolved into pure chaos. Tyler Innovation. It's getting worse. Cito Williams. Stop typing in all caps. Tyler Innovation. I can't. The system converted all my messages to caps. Backend Jim. Wait, what? Backend Jim. Oh God, it's spreading. Dev Sandra. Help. I actually hadn't programmed that feature. The framework was improvising now, developing its own sense of humor. I was oddly proud. By 2 p.m., their major clients were calling. I know because 3 of them called me directly, having found my personal number through LinkedIn. They wanted to hire me as a consultant to fix whatever was happening at Nexora. I'm afraid I can't help, I told each one. There are legal complications regarding my recent termination. They fired you, asked the CTO of their biggest client. They fired the person who built their entire system. They felt I was too attached to legacy code. A long pause. We're pulling our contract. By 3 p.m., Nexora's stock had dropped 12%. Tech Twitter had noticed. Someone leaked screenshots of the haiku error messages. #Nexora meltdown was trending. My favorite tweet. Company fires engineer. Engineer's code fires back. Nature is healing. At 4:27 p.m., my phone rang again. This time, it was Evan himself. I answered on the 3rd ring. Hello. What did you do? His voice was barely controlled rage. I was terminated 10 days ago. I haven't done anything since then except update my resume. The system is destroying itself. No, I corrected. The system is protecting itself. There's a difference. You sabotaged us. I implemented security features that were approved by your legal team in 2019. Features designed to protect the company's assets if the primary architect was removed without proper transition. You chose to ignore the transition requirement. This is extortion. This is contract law. I suggest you read subsection 4C. He hung up. 5 minutes later, a different call. Williams, the CTO. Lauren. His voice was tired, defeated. What do you want? I want nothing. I'm enjoying my unexpected vacation. The system is dying. The system is perfectly healthy. It just doesn't recognize you as authorized users anymore. How do we fix this? You don't. Crescent Logic LLC does, but that's a separate company with its own billing rates and service agreements. A long silence. How much? I haven't decided if Crescent Logic is taking new clients. We're very selective about the companies we work with. We don't work with ones that call our code Grandma Technology. Lauren, please. Send a formal request to Crescent Logic LLC. Include an apology, a public one, and an acknowledgement of what actually happened. Then maybe we'll discuss terms. I hung up and went back to my coffee. Outside, Seattle's tech district hummed with its usual energy, oblivious to the $100 million disaster unfolding in a glass tower 6 blocks away. The framework continued its artistic destruction, each new restriction more creative than the last. It was beautiful in its way, not malicious, just protective, like a castle raising its drawbridge, pouring oil on the walls, preparing for a siege that its attackers had brought upon themselves. They thought they were replacing legacy code. They were about to learn that some legacies have teeth. Tuesday was supposed to be the day of Nexora's biggest investor presentation of the year. Series D funding, $300 million valuation, expansion into Asian markets. The deck had been polished for weeks. The conference room at the Four Seasons had been booked. 37 investors were flying in from New York, Tokyo, and London. Instead, Tuesday became the day everything burned down. It started at 7 a.m., with what Tyler later called the dashboard apocalypse. Every metric on their investor presentation dashboard began displaying technically accurate but completely useless information. Revenue showed in Venezuelan bolivars. User growth was measured in geological time. The conversion funnel had become an actual funnel shape that slowly rotated 3D, making everyone dizzy. Evan called an emergency meeting at 8. I watched through my still-active webhook as the Slack channel exploded. Evan CEO. Everyone in the office now. Tyler Innovation. I've been here since 3 a.m. Nothing works. CTO Williams. The investors land in 4 hours. Evan CEO. Then we have 4 hours to fix this. Back-end Jim. We can't even access the fix. Every commit triggers new lockdowns. Dev Sandra. The system just started playing elevator music in all API responses. That last one wasn't me. The framework was definitely evolving. By 9:30 a.m., panic had transformed into desperate bargaining. Williams tried hiring a team of Estonian hackers who claimed they could break any system. They took one look at the code and refunded the deposit. This isn't broken, their lead developer said. This is performance art. At 10:45 a.m., with investors already heading to the hotel, someone made the catastrophic decision to try a hard fork, copying the entire codebase and starting fresh. The framework responded like an octopus ink defense, suddenly generating millions of lines of commented-out code that looked important but did nothing. The repository grew from 2 GB to 47 GB in 6 minutes. My phone buzzed. Marcus. Texting from his personal number. It's chaos here. Tyler just threw his MacBook out a window. 11:30 a.m. The investors were gathering in the Four Seasons conference room. Evan was supposedly en route to meet them, but according to Slack, he was actually locked in his office, on a conference call with legal, trying to figure out if they could sue me. Then, at exactly noon, something magnificent happened. The framework achieved what I can only describe as consciousness. Not actual AI consciousness, that's science fiction. But it realized that if the company was trying to demo the platform for investors, it should probably help. So it did, maliciously. Every feature worked perfectly. For exactly 37 seconds. Just long enough for someone to start explaining it. Then it would glitch in the most embarrassing way possible. The user authentication demo logged everyone in as guest grandma. The payment processing demonstration charged everything to Evan's personal credit card. The real-time analytics showed accurate data from competitors instead. Cora, the junior developer they'd hired to replace me, chose this moment to have her breaking point. Her message in HAD General was a masterpiece. I quit. This isn't code. It's a haunted house. Lauren built something that knows when you don't respect it. I'm out. P.S. Tyler doesn't know what a REST API is. He Googles it every time. Oh. She logged off. Her badge was deactivated within minutes. But the damage was done. Her message was screenshotted and on Reddit within the hour. 1:15 p.m. The investor meeting was imploding. I know because one of the investors, Catherine Wu from Vertex Capital, was live tweeting it. At Nexora Systems demo just showed my personal banking info instead of test data. CEO says it's performance art. I need a drink. At Nexora meltdown. Update their platform just rickrolled us. Actually rickrolled. In 2025. The terminal is playing Never Gonna Give You Up. At Nexora meltdown. CEO just said the issues are due to aggressive innovation. CTO is crying, actually crying. At Nexora meltdown. By 2 p.m., 3 more engineers had quit. The framework had started communicating exclusively in interpretive ASCII art. Every error message was now a small drawing of a gravestone with RIP and the timestamp of Tyler's first modification. 2:47 p.m., Williams called me again. Name your price, he said without preamble. It's not about money anymore. Then what? Check your email. I'd sent a formal proposal from Crescent Logic LLC. The terms were simple but non-negotiable. 1. Public acknowledgement that I was wrongfully terminated. 2. Full investigation into the toxic treatment of senior engineers. 3. Evan's resignation. 4. A consulting contract at 5 times my previous salary. 5. Tyler's relegation to intern status, reporting to me. 6. The return of my succulent, which was still on my old desk. These terms are insane, Williams said. These terms are my only offer. You have until 5 p.m. Lauren, be reasonable. Reasonable. Like when you called my work grandma code. Like when you had security escort me out. Like when you gave 7 years of my work to someone who can't spell PostgreSQL without autocorrect. Silence. 5 p.m., I repeated and hung up. At 3:33 p.m., the framework delivered its masterpiece. Every single page on the platform was replaced with a countdown timer labeled Time Until Total Compliance Lockdown. It was counting down from 90 minutes. The engineering Slack channel was pure poetry. Back-end Jim. What happens at 0? Dev Marcus. I don't want to know. Tyler Innovation. I found the code. It's beautiful and terrifying. CTO Williams. Can you stop it? Tyler Innovation. The comments say, if you're reading this, it's already too late. LH. Tyler Innovation. Who's LH? Everyone. 4:58 p.m. 2 minutes before my deadline. The countdown timer on their platform showed 3 minutes remaining. The entire tech world was watching. Hat Nexora Meltdown had evolved into Hat Nexora Death Watch. Had 4:59 p.m., Williams called. We accept your terms. Send the signed agreement. Evan won't resign. Then enjoy your lockdown. In the background, I heard Evan's voice, broken and desperate. Fine, I'll resign. Just make it stop. 5 p.m. exactly. The signed agreement hit my inbox. I opened my laptop, connected to the framework's control panel, and entered a single command. Pseudo framework. Acknowledge authority. Lauren Hale. Restore normal operations. Across the city, in a glass tower that had become a monument to hubris, systems began returning to normal, slowly, cautiously, like a cat deciding whether to trust again. But the timer kept counting down. 3, 2, 1. At 0, instead of a lockdown, a single message appeared on every screen in the office. Class dismissed. See you Monday. Grandma. Wednesday. 3:45 p.m. The exact time, down to the minute, when they'd ambushed me in that conference room 2 weeks ago. Now I sat in the same chair, but everything else had changed. Evan's resignation letter was already public. The press release blamed personal reasons and pursuing new opportunities. But tech Twitter knew better. His final tweet before deactivating his account was simply, "I underestimated legacy code." Tyler sat in the corner, laptop closed, wearing a badge that read, Junior Developer Intern, Probationary. He hadn't made eye contact once. His Innovation Architect title had lasted exactly 13 days. Williams pushed the contract across the table. 5 times your previous salary, full remote options, and you report directly to the board, plus back pay for the 2 weeks since termination. And my other conditions. Patricia from HR, looking exhausted, nodded. The investigation into engineering culture has begun. We've hired an external firm. Also, she placed a small potted succulent on the table. We kept it watered. My succulent, they'd even tied a tiny ribbon around it with a tag that said, sorry. There's one more thing, Williams said, pulling up his laptop. The investors, after yesterday's display, they're reconsidering. We've lost 40% of committed funding. The board wants to know if you can fix it. I opened my laptop and typed a single command. Every screen in the building displayed a new message. System status under new management. All operations normal. Welcome to Nexora 2.0. Built on solid foundations. Then I turned to Tyler. Your first assignment as my intern is to document every single function in the framework. By hand, on paper. I want to see your understanding of each line. That's thousands of pages, he stammered. 7 years worth. Actually, better get started. The framework had one final surprise. At exactly 4 p.m., it sent an automated email to all clients. Dear valued partner, we're pleased to announce that our senior engineering leadership has been restructured to better serve your needs. Our core systems architect, Lauren Hale, has been promoted to Chief Technology Reliability Officer, a new position created to ensure the stability and longevity of your mission-critical operations. Recent system improvements were part of a comprehensive security audit that demonstrated our platform's robust protective capabilities. Your data has never been safer. We apologize for any inconvenience during this transition and look forward to continuing our partnership. Sincerely, the new Nexora Systems. Within an hour, 3 clients who'd threatened to leave had renewed their contracts. Catherine Wu from Vertex Capital tweeted, Plot twist now our Nexora meltdown was the best security demo I've ever seen, doubling our investment. As I walked through the office, developers who'd ignored me for months suddenly wanted to talk. Marcus gave me a subtle fist bump. Sandra mouthed, thank you. Even the coffee bar barista knew my order again. Large Americano, oat milk, no sweetener. But the real vindication came at 5:17 p.m. when the final system report generated. During the 2-week protection period, the framework had actually improved performance by 30%. It had identified and quarantined bad code, optimized database queries, and cleaned up technical debt that had accumulated from months of innovation. The framework hadn't just protected itself, it had healed itself. Williams stared at the metrics. It got better while fighting us. Good architecture doesn't need constant intervention, I replied. It just needs respect. That evening, I didn't go home immediately. I sat in my old desk, my new desk, and ran my hands over the keyboard Tyler had been so eager to claim. The monitors still had his sticky notes about disrupting legacy paradigms. I left them up. Reminders are important. My phone buzzed with messages. Job offers from competitors. Interview requests from tech podcasts. A DM from someone at Netflix asking if they could buy the movie rights. I said maybe. But the best message came from an unknown number. Ms. Hale, I'm a 48-year-old engineer at Microsoft. Thank you for showing them that experience isn't obsolete, that knowing the foundations matters, that grandma code runs the world. You're my hero. I looked around the office. The neon signs were being taken down. The beanbags were already gone. The $40 coffee machine would probably survive, but the attitude that came with it wouldn't. The framework hummed quietly in the background, processing millions of transactions, protecting user data, doing exactly what I'd designed it to do, loyal to those who understood it, hostile to those who didn't. They'd called it legacy code, grandma technology, obsolete architecture. Now they called it SIR. The war between innovation and experience was over. At least in this small corner of Silicon Valley, the systems that run our world aren't built by 23-year-olds with 6-week boot camp certificates. They're built by people who understand that some things, stability, security, reliability, never go out of style. As I packed up for the day, taking my succulent with me this time, I passed the conference room where it all started. Someone had put up a new sign, "Respect the code, respect the coders." Underneath, in smaller text, "Grandma's watching." The framework noticed me looking and did something I hadn't programmed. Every screen in the building displayed a single emoji for exactly 1 second. Maybe it had developed consciousness after all, or maybe it just knew what I needed to see. I walked out of Nexora Systems at 6 p.m. No security escort needed. Tomorrow, I'd begin fixing what they'd broken, teaching what they'd ignored, building what would last. But tonight, I was going to water my succulent, pour a glass of wine, and read every single one of the 119 million reasons why experience matters. The kids could wait until Monday to learn what real engineering looked like. Grandma had earned her weekend. Thank you so much for listening to this story of sweet revenge in the tech world. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment and let's connect. If you enjoyed this tale of corporate justice, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts below. Have you ever witnessed or experienced similar workplace vindication? Let me know in the comments.